Our culture likes to make things simple, and gender isn't.
It was the constant fight of me saying there's nothing wrong with being this kind of girl as opposed to, well, I'm not a girl.
We really see transgender as an umbrella term.
I know lots of people, lots of men, who have vaginas.
It's not always easy to be in the middle.
I so prefer someone to just treat me like a human being.
Our culture has a pretty simplified model of gender, or traditional gender model. A model that says someone whose body has a penis would be identified as male. They would behave in a stereotypically masculine way. They would identify themselves as a man, and they would date a woman. That's what our normative or traditional gender model is. Someone whose body, whose sex is what we consider female, has a vagina, would behave in a stereotypically feminine way, would then identify themselves as a woman, and would date men. A huge number of individuals in this world don't fit into those models.
I'm a trans man, female to male transsexual, but I identify primarily as a trans man.
I am a transgendered woman.
I identify as genderqueer because I feel like it's more accurate to how I feel in terms of my own gender identity.
People want to talk about transgender, and I always say you have to start by talking about gender. That's really the sort of critical piece in the word. I use a somewhat simplified version: sex, gender role, and gender identity. And the other piece I like to touch on is sexual orientation, largely because of its relationship to gender and the fact that sometimes people confuse it with gender. Sex is about physical characteristics, organic components in our bodies, anatomic aspects of who we are, sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone, and the chromosomes. And it's often strongly related to genitalia. What is gender role? Well, it's essentially a social understanding of how we are in a gendered sense in the world. It can be something that we do ourselves. It can also be something that other people see in us. And typically when you have a boy, you give the boy trucks, action figures. A girl, you might give dolls, sewing kits. These are very gendered decisions. We gender color, we gender clothing. It's fine for a girl to behave as in a masculine way, what we might call a tomboy, until she reaches puberty. And then she's supposed to sort of femme up, fit in within the more powerful gender stereotypes of what a woman's supposed to behave.
Because I felt different a lot, I think I overcompensated by doing things that were kind of like hyper feminine. You know, like I had long hair, I wore dresses, makeup.
Gender identity is nothing more than how we see ourselves in a gendered way. You can't look inside your body for it, it's inside your head, it's between your ears. People translate that into one of our common cultural choices, which is either man or woman. But clearly, gender has to be unique, because we're all too complex for us to state our gender in such a simple term. The relationship between gender and sexual orientation is important to discuss here. A lot of people think that one is the other and vice versa. When people say gay, they often think they're talking about trans at the same time. And I'd like to make a distinction that all gay people are not transgender and all transgender people are not gay. Everybody has both a gender and a sexual orientation. That's the traditional gender model. That's what our media uses, that's what our advertising uses, our films use that, our paperwork. When you go into an agency, people have to fill out paperwork. They ask you to check one box or the other. They don't give you any room for complexity. the traditional gender model doesn't actually fit large numbers of people, then we're really given two choices. We can either change the people or we can change the model.
When I was a really small child, I do basically remember feeling confused as far as my own gender was concerned.
There are times in my childhood that I did feel different in terms of my gender. Like, I never really thought there's something wrong with me or there's something different about my gender, because I don't think I ever really thought about it. I just knew that I wasn't as feminine as other girls, and I just felt kind of different.
The therapist asked me if I knew the difference between a boy and a girl, and I was just sort of like, and I think at the time, people were telling me that I was a boy, but I felt like a girl, so I didn't really think there was any difference. You know, I think I was 8 years old at the time.
For most people, the sex they were assigned at birth is a pretty good match with their gender identity. For transgender people, it becomes clear very often at a young age that their sense of themselves is different than what's reflected in the mirror, what's reflected when they look down at their bodies.
I would actually physically get ill all the time when I started to develop breasts, and I started to actually get to a place where my body was becoming more woman-like, and I didn't really understand it.
I wasn't comfortable in the assigned role of being a boy. I was born, and because I had a certain genital, situation. I was, it was like, that's a boy, and but I never felt that, and I don't think I was ever masculine in any way.
I was consistently challenged every single day about my gender. Somebody had to make some comment about it. Somebody had to say something about it. I was taunted by kids all the time.
And there was a lot of anxiety, I think, when I was growing up about how feminine I was. And my third grade teacher called my mother and said, your son is going to end up in New Orleans wearing a dress if we don't get him in therapy right now. So I think I grew up internalizing a lot of transphobia, that there was so much, and homophobia as well, there was so much anxiety about me being so feminine and trying to fix me.
There have always been people in different cultures and over time who would fit into the definition of people who live in a cross-gender way or who live outside the norms of just male or just female or just man and just woman.
I started having a lot of friends who were coming out as trans or as genderqueer, and I really didn't quite understand, and it just seemed really foreign to me. And as I started to learn, in an effort to try to understand what was going on with them, a lot of it rang true for me.
I actually met my first trans friend, and in the right moment, for whatever right reasons, he kind of just looked at me and said, so how do you feel about your gender? And I kind of broke down.
That's basically been my experience my entire life, that I don't really fit, that I'm an outcast, et cetera, so that's the history. And so a lot of it for me, in terms of my process, is about trying to accept myself.
I felt really overwhelmed, not in a bad way, but definitely in a way that was 25 years in the making.
It was just really a relief to say, oh, like, I can identify as genderqueer.
An alternative to the traditional gender model would be a model that I would call the authentic gender model, one that actually represents everybody, all 6 billion people on our planet, using the same 4 components: sex, gender role, gender identity, and sexual orientation, but looking at each of those as being more complex than just one or the other, looking at them as a scale or a spectrum. We know that there are men that have breasts and there are women that have very small breasts or no breasts. We know that people's body hair differs, that people's chromosome structures differ, hormone levels differ, and we know that their genitalia differs. Our bodies are born differently, they also change over time. Some may choose to change their bodies, so that sex would have to be plotted differently for each individual.
Part of my own history as far as being a trans person is really understanding and really remembering every part of my transition and remembering what the struggle was that I went through in order to get to where I am today. I've had 2 surgeries and been on hormones for 5.5 years, and have paid a lot of money and have had to work really hard, and I'm really broke.
Gender roles do change over time, and they change within cultures. In sort of Western American culture, the only emotion that we really give and allow men to have is either anger or a sort of stoic pride. If men cry, we consider that feminine. But that's not the way in all cultures. In some cultures, men cry very openly and are expected to, and it's considered masculine behavior. So it's clear that it's not a genetic component of who a man is, and it's not a biological component, but crying or anger can be seen as social aspects of who we are.
Expressing my feminine spirit outwardly is crucial for me to be true to myself and for me to be happy.
The third component will be gender identity, something that's unique for each individual. So 6 billion people, 6 billion gender identities, not even a spectrum or a scale, just individual points.
I never really felt like a lot of other people that I know in terms of being born in the wrong body. I feel pretty comfortable enough that I don't think that I'm going to physically transition. I don't know, things could change.
The final piece will be sexual orientation. Our traditional model likes to say that men date women and women date men. We know it's much more complex than that. We know that there are people that there are women that date women, there are men that date men, there are people that date both sexes or genders. Some people are attracted to transgender people, some people are celibate.
Because I date other masculine or people or men, I identify more with a gay male community or as a gay man than anything. I don't know. But I don't identify as a gay man.
So each of these aspects, where we're talking about sex, gender role, gender identity, or sexual orientation, is some sort of spectrum or scale, something vast and explosive as opposed to narrow and contracted.
One way to define transgender people is people who don't conform or identify with the expectations associated with the gender or sex they were assigned at birth.
You're constantly overly concerned about the rest of the world, because what does that mean? If I start to transition now, then I have to interact with the rest of the world. If I had just been dealing with myself, I think I would have come to terms with it sooner than I actually did. Now I'm very attached to my own identity being as a trans man.
People come from different places and different cultures and races and classes. So the terms that people use for themselves may really vary. People have really different terms and words that are used to identify themselves. Drag king, drag queen, bigendered, omnigendered, female to male, male to female, trans woman, transgender man, transsexual woman, femme queen, tranny, transgenderist. Another definition of transgender would be people who feel that the binary gender system of male and female doesn't leave enough room for their identities.
I don't identify as a man or a woman, and there have been times in my life when I have really conformed more to more traditional, like, femininity, but it never really felt that right for me.
A definition of genderqueer for a person might be someone who doesn't identify with the dichotomy of the norms of a man or a woman, who might feel somewhere in between. They might feel like somebody who identifies as a man and a woman, or neither a man or a woman, or something right in the middle. People assume that all of the transgender people out there are going through a medical gender transition. And we know that in the relative population of people out there who might be gender nonconforming, a relatively small number of people actually go through what would be considered a full medical transition.
They don't always understand that if I don't feel like a woman as I was supposed to because I was born a female and socialized as female, then that must mean that I'm transitioning to be a man. And that doesn't really fit for me.
If you are in a situation where you work in an agency or someplace where you have a lot of contact with individuals coming in and in numbers, you've got to have some way to be able to equalize it so that transgender people will have the ability to identify themselves and have the space to do that and have you interact with them in an appropriate way.
People are looking at me and they have to give me an ultrasound on my lower abdomen, and they're looking at my paperwork, and it's just, you know, of course, it says something about checking for things like cysts, ovarian cysts, and all of this other business. I mean, the technicians are just like dumbfounded. Like, they really didn't know what to do. They really didn't understand what it was that they were looking at.
It's not always easy to know how people refer to themselves.
For me, I think it's really important that just on a gender level that she is used, her.
We can take a look at someone and see based on the way they're dressed or how they look. That might be an incorrect guess. The other way to find out would be something that sounds simple, which is to ask. To ask someone, how do you identify yourself? How do you identify your gender? What pronoun do you like to use?
I always really appreciate it when people ask me what my gender identity or my pronoun preference is.
The problem with asking is that sometimes people feel like it should be obvious based on how they look.
I think my presentation is fairly clear. I think, even if it might not be fully successful, what I'm going for, I think, is clear.
So asking might offend somebody, but one of the ways around that is to actually ask everybody their gender. At the center, we have intake forms and screening forms so that everybody who walks through the door, we ask them their sexual orientation, we ask them their age, we ask them their race or ethnicity, and we also ask them their gender identity. So that allows us to actually have people self-identify, so we don't have to guess by looking at somebody what their gender is.
Sometimes it does feel like I'm putting myself on the chopping block, for sure. But I'd rather people ask questions, even if they're not nice questions, than not try to understand.
For me, there's so many other aspects of who I am beyond me being transgendered, and I think part of what upsets me is when people can't get past that.
One of the important things is to not just reduce a transgender person to only having this identity.
I work at bars, I go promote for events and benefits, and I'm not a morning person.
I'm an artist. More than anything, I think I'm an artist.
I'm Chinese American, I'm a performance artist, I am a therapist, I'm a dog owner, you know, like all these different things.
It is so painful to live a lie. It really is, and it's so freeing to be true to yourself. And we should be applauded for that. We should not be persecuted for that. We should not be discriminated against and denied services, housing, jobs for that. We should be celebrated, and we should be valorized. And I think that's what I want to say to people.